So here we have the South Pacific scenario of the game Empire of the Sun, and I'm recording this as part of a playthrough, and the goal of the playthrough is to share it to the community and to do several things. One is to document the playthrough, but also to seek any suggestions, advice, corrections from those who are more experienced. I do not pretend to have a full grasp of the game. I've worked with it for a little while now. And also for those who are less experienced or new to the game, this could be an instructive example of how to play the game. And also, I will try, even though this is not framed as a tutorial per se, I will try to explain some concepts to help newer players. So I'm using the Vassal module, the latest one, 6.0.2, the excellent module. And I'm also using the CDG solo system for my card draws, which is a system that was developed by Stuka Joe. And I have my Allied and Japanese card displays and set up off camera. And there's also this little sort of dice cam, you see my fingers wiggling there, that I've set up just to document the dice rolls. For the CDG solo system, for those who don't know, there is this one die here, this fate die, that gets rolled when there is a card play by either side, and that helps to determine, depending on the dice roll, helps to focus your choices. It still gives you agency, which is a nice thing, but it also preserves some mystery. It gives that little bit of uncertainty that one might have if you were playing against another player. So I'll be using that. And also for those who are familiar with the game and familiar with the South Pacific scenario specifically, will notice that the map is not in the original opening position. The pieces are a little bit moved around. And that's because I've already gone ahead and played the first card plays for both sides. Actually, I've gone ahead and played the first card play, the Operation Watchtower by the Allies and the counterattack at Savo Island, which is the Japanese reaction. And that's a typical opening move for this scenario. That process actually was taught to me by Mark Herman himself, not personally, but through a video of a teach and play video with Mark Herman and Fred Serval through, I think it's Homo Ludens is the channel. It's on YouTube. Find it. If you don't know it, watch it. It's entertaining and it's instructive. It taught me a lot, and I watched it and I played along and tried to kind of figure things out, following along with the rule book, which I have also off to the side here. My increasingly tattered rule book, which is a sign of a game that gets play. I probably, like everyone else, have other things in my life that interfere with game time and a job and all that stuff that comes with being a responsible adult. It is very unlikely that I will play this all the way through without having some breaks and intermissions from time to time. That's another nice thing about having the Vassal module, is that it allows you to save the game in various states and come back to it. And now we're phasing over to the Japanese player for the Japanese player's first full card play. And what that will necessitate me doing is rolling the fate die to see what is in store for the Japanese. Let me roll the fate die. And we have D and E. You can see that there. Sometimes my camera is not super focused. So what this D and E means, there are 5 slots for those of you who don't know the CDG solar system, A, B, C, and D. And C has the draw deck. And then depending on the dice roll, it's going to have you focus on some part of that display. You know, it might be A and B, it might be D and E, it might be A through C, it might be C only, et cetera, et cetera. And with each roll, there's some different conditions that come into play to kind of make the system a little bit more dynamic. And in this roll, D and E, what it instructs me to do is to flip over any face down cards and reveal them in slots D and E. And then I'm allowed to choose between the cards that are in D and E to play for any allowable purpose. So I'm going to take a moment and take a look at those cards and come back to you with the card chosen. All right, so as you can see, there's a card now on the map display here. And for that card, I've chosen the Rear Admiral Matami Ugaki, card number 9, which was in slot D. And the other card, by the way, for those of you who are curious, was a submarine reaction card. I could have played it for ops, but it seemed much more logical to me to save that for a reaction. And this card is a 3 ops card, so it allows, and it's a military card, so it allows for a fairly extensive amount of moving around and doing things. One thing that is interesting about the ops values of cards, so if you're familiar with the game or just learning the game, the ops values run from 1 to 3, and it's more handy to think of the ops value less in terms of card power, like a 3 ops card typically might be more powerful than a 2 or a 1. Yes, that may in fact be the case in many places, but a card value is also an expression of time. So because the turns in Empire of the Sun are typically 4 months, I like to think of these ops values. The ops value is the number that's found in the upper left-hand corner of the card. As an expression of time, I kind of think of them roughly akin to a number of weeks. So it's not exactly that, but it's a good way to think of it. So this card means that you're playing an operation that's going to take maybe 2 to 3 weeks worth of actual game time. And so therefore, because it's longer, your units can move further and you can do more things just because there's more time involved. So with the Ugaki card, it's actually one of the more powerful cards in the Japanese deck. And it allows me to activate any HQ. It's got a logistics value of 6, which means I can activate up to 6 units in addition to the number of units that are could be activated in the headquarters efficiency number, which is that red number on the lower right-hand side of the counter of the headquarters. And it's got limiting condition of only 1 ground unit that could be activated. And it has a bonus for movement, which is not really going to be applicable here because of the small size of the map. Okay, I've gone ahead and activated units from the Japanese Imperial Navy. One of the things, and this is also for newer players, is the concept of inter-service rivalry in the game of Empire of the Sun. And what that means is that if you are under the condition of inter-service rivalry, it basically limits you to activate to activations that only occur inside of one or the other arm of your military. So both sides have Army and Navy as the military wings, and therefore, in this particular case, I'm activating Navy units, which are white-faced counters. I could have chosen to activate Army units, which are the yellow counters, but the Navy activations give me more possibilities to do things at this current time. So because I have a logistics value of 6, and I'll zoom in just a little bit, because I have a logistics value of 6 as part of this card, it really didn't matter which headquarters out of the 2 I chose, South Seas or Combined Fleet. So I went ahead and activated the South Seas HQ and then activated all of the Japanese Navy units on board. I have an idea of what I might do, and just to, before I make that decision firmly, just to talk a little bit about this particular scenario's strategic and tactical concerns. So the Allies are currently in a losing position. the Allies need to make progress, not just progress of war for the sake of political will, which is a potential victory trigger for the Japanese, but also the Allies need to control more ports than the Japanese by the end of turn 6. The Japanese have a 5-port advantage over the Allies as it stands. And so you can see that the Allies have some work to do. The Japanese, on the other hand, their primary focus here is slowing the Allies down, basically preventing the Allies from taking ports or keeping them slogged down enough so that they don't take the requisite number of ports by the time that turn 6 rolls around. There's a couple of things in this particular scenario that potentially complicate matters, and one is that the Allies are going to get quite a few units in turn 6 in terms of their reinforcements. So a lot of what the Japanese are planning to do or should plan to do is going to happen in the first couple of turns. The Japanese will have a little bit of an advantage next turn with units coming into truck, and you'll notice that I don't actually have those units stacked up in truck right now. They are on the turn track. I just found it easier to put all those units on the turn track and treat them as if they were reinforcements coming in on turn 4. So I could make a play for Port Moresby, which is a bit of a risky play, but would be a very good success if I was able to pull it off as the Japanese. Could also make a play for Gilly Gilly, which might be a little easier, but not guaranteed. Or I could play a little more conservative and just try to damage the U.S. fleet a little bit, perhaps maybe take out a carrier or two, something along those lines. So let me think about some strategic options, and I will come back with a plan. Okay, so you can see that I have moved a bunch of units around for the Japanese, and I've created a number of battle hexes. The primary objective here for the Japanese, and I decided, even though it's a little risky, to try to take the port of Port Moresby. Now, to support that, I have the heavy cruiser Nachi, or Naki, I'm not sure exactly what the pronunciation is, having moved into the port to shell the port from the sea, and it's supported by the air and the 26th Bomber Group. Then I'm, of course, marching the SS Brigade, which is, I tend to think of them as Marines, although Mark says that they're not technically Marines, but they're naval ground units of the Japanese. The SS ground unit that was stationed in Leh is marching into Port Moresby over the mountains. That's kind of the main event. But I have all these other battle hexes, and I've got reasons for why I've done this. And the main reason is to try to keep the Allies busy while I'm doing my main event, and to try to limit the Allied response. These are a series of blocking or screening moves to try to keep the Allied response down as much as possible. I have the kamikaze destroyer group having sailed into Espiritu Santo to engage the Enterprise. That's probably going to be, unless I roll really well, that is probably going to be a suicide mission, but I have a reason for that. In Battle Hex B over Guadalcanal, I have a bombing mission from the 25th Air Force bomber unit bombing Guadalcanal. And then I have C, I've got the Oba sailing into Gilly Gilly and the 21st Bomber unit engaging. And then finally down here in Townsville, I've got the light cruiser Tenryu having sailed in to basically do an engagement of the Kent. Some of these I know are not going to do anything. And in fact, like I mentioned in the case of the kamikaze, unless the Allies roll very poorly and I roll really well, this is probably a suicide mission for the kamikaze. And that's a calculated risk. The reason being is that in addition to keeping these specific units out of the battle, it also has, by virtue of the rules and by virtue of how these things work, it'll limit the response of the Allies in terms of being able to offer ground support. So in previous playthroughs that I've done by myself, I was always able to, with the Allies, use one amphibious shipping point that is remaining and ship a ground unit into Port Moresby. And that usually ended up resulting, unless I rolled really well, in a failure of the ground battle. And a condition for amphibious assaults, even for the reaction player, because in this case, even though it's friendly port to friendly port, there's a battle hex, and therefore it becomes an amphibious move, is that if there is a enemy naval unit in that battle hex prior to the amphibious move, that amphibious ground unit must have escort by a friendly naval unit. And secondly, it has to travel the entire distance, the entire length of travel with that naval unit. Otherwise, it doesn't count. That ground unit would just be turned away, wouldn't be able to enter. So in this particular case, the Allies happen to have 3 ground units that could potentially make this move, with the condition that there's a naval unit attached to the ground unit. One is over here in Espiritu Santo. I've got this 8-8 Marine unit, and then I've got the Enterprise carrier. And the Enterprise, even though it's a carrier, still counts as a naval unit for this purpose. So I could sail this 8-8 Marine unit and the Enterprise as part of a reaction into Port Moresby and contribute not only the Enterprise's air naval strength to the battle, but also provide additional support for the Port Moresby garrison that's defending Port Moresby. The other one is going to be this 1212 1st Marine unit with North Carolina. And because they're busy getting bombed, they cannot move. They're pinned. And then the last one is the light cruiser coming in to engage the Kent. The Kent is going to be busy and cannot, therefore, accompany the 1st American unit. The 2nd Australian unit cannot be shipped. And the reason why is because it would actually cost 2 amphibious shipping points, whereas the 1st Army here is on the reduced side, and therefore it is 1 amphibious shipping point and could potentially be moved. And then finally, if you're wondering, the 14th Army, which would also cost 1 amphibious shipping point should it be shipped amphibiously into action, could move, but it doesn't have a Navy unit. And then the other problem with this is the whole inter-service rivalry thing. So there's another wrinkle. In this case, in the case of Townsville, that is possible. I've actually done that in a playthrough I did by myself, where I activated the Anzac headquarters. And because I activated Anzac headquarters, I chose Army, and then the Kent could be activated as part of the Navy. I can't activate Army and Navy of the United States because of the inter-service rivalry condition. So next is the Allied reaction. And the first thing you do is check and see if you have a reaction card in your hand. Now, when using the CDG Solar System, you can play any face-up card in the card display for a reaction, assuming it's a valid reaction card, and there are none. I'm looking down now at the Allied cards, and there are no reaction cards I can play. So what that's going to necessitate then is me to make a reaction roll. And because the Matami Ogaki card has an EC, an event card intelligence value of 7, that means that I have to roll a 7 or less in order to respond to this attack and change the condition from surprise attack to intercept. Now, this is going to be further modified by a -2 dice modifier because I was moving a lot of units around, and those units were passing through, into, and out of zones of control by the Allies. And you can see on the display in the vassal module, you can turn on and turn off zones of control. And so any air units that are in supply are exhibiting a 2 hex zone of control. Blue means Allied zones of control, red means Japanese zones of control, and then purple is where the zones of control overlap. Those zones of control are neutralized. However, for the sake of doing like an intelligence roll, those zones of control are still active. In other words, there's still planes flying around, and you can gather intelligence from the air. You can see ships moving around and so forth. So there is a -2 modifier to this roll. And what this means is that it'll modify now to a 9 or less, which would be automatic, except in the game, a natural 9 on a roll, will always fail. I'm going to roll not a red die. I'm going to roll the Allied blue die and see if the Allies see what's coming. They probably should, unless I roll a 9. If I roll a 9, the Allies aren't prepared. And I rolled a 9. So this is interesting. It's a rare occurrence, but I did roll a natural 9. Bad news for the Allies. What this means is that all of this is happening as a surprise attack. And that means that I get to attack the Allies flat-footed. They do not get to mount a response until after I've done my attack rolls. So they'll still get a response, and they still may do damage, and I still may roll poorly, but this is the best possible outcome here for Japanese. So let me go ahead and set that up. So we'll resolve Battle Hex A. And so the first thing to do is I'm going to roll. The only thing that can happen is if I roll a 9. If I roll a 9, then that means that I've scored a critical hit, and then I can reduce the lowest defense value piece or take a step loss against the lowest defense value piece. So I'm going to roll and see what happens. And I roll a 2. So I have done nothing there, which is an expected result. On the flip side, however, the Allies can do something. So they still get to now shoot back. And so rolling this one out, and they rolled a 1. And so that's only going to be a 1/4 result on that 22 combat factors. That resolves to 6 hit points. By the way, I should have given the Japanese a +3 on the surprise attack roll, but again, nothing would have happened. Natural 9 is the only thing that would have scored a hit. So those 6 points against the kamikaze won't do anything. So there was a lot of activity, but as it turns out, the kamikaze survived. It was the best possible outcome, with the exception of if I had rolled a 9, in which case that would have been really the best possible outcome for the Japanese. So that battle hex is now resolved. I can delete that marker, and we can move on to battle hex B. And so I will roll now for the Japanese and see what happens in battle hex B. They're going to be bringing 10 combat factors into play. And I rolled a, you can't see that, I rolled a 2. So the +3 modifies that 2 to a 5, and that's a half result. So that's still only 5 points. That does nothing to any of the Allied units. The lowest defense factor for the Allied units is this first Marine Air Wing, and that's a 10. So now the Allies now get to shoot back again with full value, and they rolled a 1. Wow, the Allies aren't doing very well. Okay, and that's going to be a 1/4 result on also 22 points, and that's going to be 6 points, and that's not going to do anything to the Japanese. So again, lots of activity, but nothing ends up happening, and I can delete and resolve that battle hex. So now we're going to move on to battle hex C, which is what happens down here in Gilly Gilly. So here's the Japanese attack roll. Again, I need to remember to add +3. I rolled a 9. So that cannot be modified past that. That's a 9. It's a natural 9. So I do score a critical hit. And so with that, the Wasp has been sunk. And the Wasp being sunk, since it's not simultaneous combat, the Wasp does not shoot back. So the Wasp is sunk. I can resolve battle hex, and I can eliminate the Wasp. Okay. So that takes care of Battle Hex C. So instead of going to Port Moresby, let's go down to what happens down here in Townsville. And again, I will roll. Again, I'm not expecting to do much. If I roll a natural 9, then I'll be able to do something. Okay, I rolled an 8. That's close, but it's still not enough. I score 4 combat factors. 8 plus 3 is 11, but that doesn't do anything. Anything 10 or more, it doesn't modify to anything. So nothing gets damaged there in the Allies. And the Allies only have the Kent there, and the Kent is unlikely to do anything unless the Kent scores a critical hit. So the Allies roll 4, and that will do nothing. Lots of activity, not a lot of damage. And this is now going to take us over to the main event, which is Battle Hex D. And the first thing we do is resolve the air-naval combat. So we're going to have the Japanese on their surprise attack with 20 combat factors, the 26th Air Wing and the the heavy cruiser Naki. And I'm going to roll and see what happens. And they rolled a 7. Add 3, that modifies to a 10. Again, that's just a 1 times combat factor. So they're going to deliver 20 combat factors against the Allies. So those 20 are going to go up against the Australian Air Wing, and that is going to knock the Australian Air Wing out because it's got 10. So we flip it over, and then another 10, that's 20 points, and that eliminates the Air Wing. And that's it. So now there is nothing left to shoot back at us. And so now we do ground combat. So with ground combat, the surprise attack condition does not matter. It's simultaneous. So I'm going to roll both dice. And so it still could go wrong for the Japanese. We're going to see what's going to happen here. The Japanese do get a -3 to their roll. And so here we go. Oof. Japanese are doing well. They rolled another 9. I'm rolling a lot of 9s with this die. And then the Americans, or the Allies, rolled a 2. Okay, that's going to be bad news for the Port Moresby division. Because I was attacking in mountainous terrain, I get a -3, so that 9 will modulate back down to a 6. And the Allies stay with the 2, but the way that this works out with ground combat factors is that the Japanese will score 6 hit points and the Allies will score 2 hit points. Those 2 hit points aren't enough to do any damage to my 6 defense factor. However, those 6 hit points are enough to just eliminate the Port Moresby garrison, which is now out of the game. And the Japanese have won that round. I can resolve the battle hex. And now we're going to go to post-battle movement. Okay, so I've concluded post-battle movement. In this case, since the Allies weren't able to mount a reaction, they do not get post-battle movement. They did, however, have to do an emergency move out of Port Moresby. The Anzac headquarters, and I will change the map size here. The Anzac headquarters was moved to turn 4, so they'll be able to reposition in turn 4. And the second thing is, you'll notice that really the only hex that changed hands, even though I destroyed the Wasp at Gilly Gilly, I did not take control of Gilly Gilly because I did not have a ground unit to move into Gilly Gilly. So Port Moresby has now become Japanese, and I've moved other units around. I sent the 26th Air Wing back to Biak to project zone of influence over the western side of the island of New Guinea. And I've moved the Kamikaze into Bougainville just to have a unit in that port. That port seems a little unprotected at the moment, and I've left the Nachi. I know I'm going to say it both ways every time. in the port of Port Moresby, and of course the attacking unit, the SS Brigade, that attacked over the mountains from Leh, is now garrisoned in Port Moresby, and that concludes that battle round. Okay, so now we're going to get to the fate die, and we're going to see what happens with the Allied play. And I rolled this funny thing, which is C with a double exclamation point. And what this one does, and now it's out of focus. There we go, kind of blurry. What this is that I get to turn a card over if it's not already face up in deck C, in slot C, which is the draw deck. And I can play that card for any allowable purpose. Or I can play a ops card, the lowest valued ops card that happened to be face up in the card display. Currently only A and B, slots A and B are face up at the moment. So I will flip over C and see what we got. Okay, so let me consider my choices and I'll come back to you with a play. All right, I've considered options. And what I've decided to do is play, and you can see it on the screen, Operation Toenails. But because Toenails was located in slot A, I can only play it for ops. And that's fine. It's a 2 ops card. I'm going to activate the Southwest Pacific, and I'm going to activate Navy units. And the goal of this particular play is mostly defensive positioning at this point. It's not to try to get Port Moresby. I'm not quite in the right positioning to try to retake Port Moresby. So let me activate units and tell you what I'm going to do. So I've gone ahead and I've activated units. And what I've done here is I've activated 4 units, which I can, 2 for the headquarters efficiency value, plus 2 for the ops value, so that's 4, so I've got 4 units. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take the 1212 1st Marine Division that took Guadalcanal, and I'm going to send them over to Gilly Gilly. Because it's friendly port to friendly port, that is a strategic move, and it costs no amphibious shipping points to do. Similarly, I'm going to take this 8-8 unit that's located in Efate and ship it over to Guadalcanal. Then I'm going to take the Enterprise and sail it over to Gilly Gilly to project some zone of influence over there and keep Gilly Gilly better protected. And then I'm going to take the Special Forces unit that's located down here in Noumea and move them up into Espiritu Santo. All right, so now we phase over to the Japanese player. And I'm going to roll the fate die again. And I'm down to my last card. Both sides have 1 card left to play for the turn. And so I'm going to roll the die and see what my options are. All right, so this is a funny one. This is E, which is kind of hard to see. There we go, to focus it in with my fingers there. It's E with the less than sign. So in this particular case, it basically means the following. It means if there's only 1 face-up or no face-up cards, you flip any 2 cards until you have 2 face-up cards, and then you can play any face-up card for an event, or play the lowest valued face-up ops card for any allowable purpose. So let me take a look and see what's available, and I'll get back to you. I've decided to do the following. I'm going to play my last card. Instead of playing the card, I'm going to take that last card and move it to the future offensives queue. I'm going to take General Dachi and move that card over to future operations. And that will conclude the Japanese play for this turn. And now it phases over to the American/allies. Okay, so time to roll the fate die and see what happens. All right, so I get A, B. You can probably see that. And that's similar to D and E in that if either card slot is not face up, flip them face up. and then you can play A or B for any allowable purpose. So I'm going to take a look and see what is possible and get back to you. All right. In examining my two possible choices, I've decided to go with Operation Cherry Blossom, and similarly to what I did with the Japanese, I'm going to also send this card to Future Offensive's queue as my last card play. So I will go ahead and do that. And now that concludes the turn. We're going to do end of turn cleanup and get us up to the beginning of turn 2. Sorry, turn 2 for the game, turn 4 for the scenario. All right, we've advanced the game turn, and the fleet that was on its way to Truk, the Japanese fleet, has arrived in Truk. And now we're going to place reinforcements, get some replacements in the game, roll for the submarine warfare attack, and go from there. All right, and before we conclude this particular segment, we now are set up for turn 2. Replacements and reinforcements have arrived and been placed accordingly, and we have adjusted markers accordingly, and the submarine strategic warfare roll was unsuccessful. It was an 8, so it did not get modified below 0, 0 or below. So the Japanese and the Allies will both get full card draws, so that'll bring them both up to 4 on the record, and we're going to come back with another video of turn 4.